If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast, where we bring you stories that inspire you and strategies to help you tap into your potential and become the next best version of yourself. We are joined today by an advocate for your brain health and mental well-being, speaker, flow coach, neuro and data scientist, and she brings raw truth and battle-tested neuroscience to show you how healing begins. Not with grand plans, but with your next breath. Dr. Khai Win, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ian. That's thanks. You're like the fourth person who called me doctor now, besides my mom and Chris from our cohort, and Ben.
Well, you put the work in and you achieved that, so we want to honor that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for our listeners and viewers, Khai and I met through Ben Newman's coaching program, and she is just an amazing person. And every time I talk to her, the more flabbergasted I get about how amazing you are and how you are able to break down like complex information into, messages or messaging that everyday Joes like me can understand. So I really am excited that you're on the show with us, and our viewers and our listeners are definitely in for a treat. So let's dive right in, okay?
Awesome.
All right. So you're a neuroscientist, you're a data scientist, but you're also a flow coach. So for those of us who don't know, can you tell us what a flow coach is?
Yeah, absolutely. So people may have heard of what flow is and the phrase athletes getting in the zone. And that's what flow is all about. It's one time just passes by. You're just completely absorbed in what you're doing, right? And for decades, the flow state seems like inaccessible to normal Joe folks like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
But when we remove all the barriers to enter, to get into the flow state, all of us can achieve that, because what we're missing is that flow is a biological, neurological state, right? It's like our brain is like a computer, right? It's functioning, but what the difference between the computer and, our human brain, it's that it's always listening, but then it's always been reshuffling all the different resources. And so in order to get to the flow state, which is very biologically demanding, because when you are completely absorbed in what you're doing, basically all the different biological resources in our brain to make sure that you're focused, right? You're attentive, and you're actually meeting that challenge, whatever the task that you're doing at hand. That explains the reason why it's biologically demanding. And so in order for you to get into that flow state, you basically have to first remove all those different barriers, right? Like, back in high school, you probably heard of like the potential energy, right? Like that little like bell curve, and there's the activation energy, right? And so activation energy is like that little jump that you need before actually getting to that peak. And so even before you get to that peak, you have to remove all the different barriers so that you are mentally and also physically ready to get into that flow state. And so as a flow coach, and also I coach myself as well to get into the flow state, because I code all the time as a data scientist. And the writer also needs to get into the flow state, right? Like the flow state is not just specific to one role or one title, right? It could be for a parent who need to plan a trip, and as a parent, to plan a trip is no easy task, right? It has to do a lot of different coordination. It has to find different things that our children want to go to and all the different stuff. And so then, okay, how do I narrow my focus so that I can actually efficiently, effectively focus on this particular task within a given time. Because ultimately, when we're getting into that flow state, especially now working remotely, what we wanted to do is to gain back our time, right? And to be more effective so that we can enjoy what we're doing in the moment and then actually have more time to do whatever other things we want to do.
There are so many questions just from that I want to ask you about, what are some of the things that we can do to get into flow? Is this something that high achievers use all the time, especially athletes? But I have so many questions that I want to ask you, Khai. So maybe we'll circle back to that. But I also want to talk to you about, so kind of what I mentioned in the intro here. You transform complex brain science into what you call practical mental fitness strategies. And I'm hoping you can unpack what that means for our listeners and our viewers, because I know there is so much gold in there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of mental toughness coming from band's world and in the sports world. Mental toughness is a no-brainer term that we all use to train ourselves physically, mentally to get into, again, to that flow state, to get us give us that extra jolts to keep going, right? Like, oh, you gotta be mentally tough. But one of the things I came across, especially, when I was going through very difficult, challenging time of my life, actually 3 times I have faced suicidal ideations, different experience of my life. It's tough. You can't be mentally tough to get over the hump. You can't be going through, I'm going to get through it, when you are facing that hopelessness. Hopelessness is that belief, like your perception of reality that nothing will ever change. And so to me, that's how mental fitness comes about, because it's like going to the gym. It's a muscle, right? It's a daily practice you have to consistently be putting in. And there is that hope. It is possible, although you might not see it right away, like going to the gym. Like most of the time, I remember Dan, my partner, when we first working out, he started saying things like, I don't see any difference. I don't see any muscle, any biceps coming up. And then he's like, if it's anything, I feel like I gain more weight. I'm like, babe, it's like all the different integration, right? It includes diets and working out, but consistently. But anyway, going back to the mental fitness, it's like going to the gym. You're not going to see that result right away, but it's that critical piece. What do you do when you feel like things are going not your way? What do you feel like you have no hope to hold on to, right? Because you and I, we've always faced impossible challenges that life has handed to us, that pain has become our power, right? When people say, oh, you're not gonna get better, you're not gonna walk forever, you're not gonna heal, that mentality of, oh, watch me, I'm the motherfucker who's gonna come back and punch you in the face, right? That is us transforming whatever that painful moment into something better, greater. But then that's not sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Because there are times where you lose that sense of identity, right? The only thing you know what to do is playing football all your life. And when you can no longer play football, what do? We've seen over and over again with NFL players, right? And they have to basically retrain themselves to reinvent themselves. But before they reinvent themselves, and when they lose a sense of identity, there's this gap that no one talk about. There's this gap that when you wake up each day, right, it just feels like shit. When you feel like waking up each day just become a burden, then what do, right? All of us, we've been walking around and basically defining our self-worth to what people say about us, defining our self-worth and our potential set by society expectations, set by what our boss and our leaders said about us, our parents, and all these cultural upbringings. And then so it influences how we think about ourselves. And then there are days where you're just like, fuck this, right? I'm tired of fighting, right? Because living is not easy task. And so for me, mental toughness, I can't be tough when I feel like I'm losing hope, when I feel like the entire world around me is crumbling, when I'm faced and drenched literally in that toxic positivity and that, oh yeah, I need to be strong. I can do it. I'm ambitious. I am strong. And then in reality, I am drowning. And then there's that gap in the expectations and the reality that then create more self-doubt. And so it just become a self-fulfilled toxic cycle. Then that's why toxic positivity is, it can be dangerous at times because you're saying one thing that, oh, I need to be positive. I can do it. I'm capable. And then you're not feeling it. You're not believing it, right? There's this gap. And so for me, that's where mental fitness comes in, knowing that, yes, you don't have to worry about the next year, the next week, the next hour, right? You just have to worry about 1 minute at a time. And that's where that one breath at a time comes in because, when your bank account is saying no, when your bank account is screaming, when you're drenched in debt, when you're drenched in being laid off and how you're going to support your family, it's hard to make that comeback, especially when you feel like there is no hope. And so, that's where different misconception about major depression as well as PTSD and traumatic experience comes in. And we need to realize that as a society, sometimes we can't just be tough. We need that support system. We need that little realization that we can just take that tiny step because no one prays about the effort that you're putting in. No one prays about how much strength it takes to just freaking breathe right now, to take that next breath, right? And it's easy when you can be mentally tough, when you have the support system. I already have 2 different examples in our life. Ben is one of them, right? We know his story. He lost his mom when he was 8. But then, from your show as well, he has that support system so that he can actually nurture himself. And the trajectory is completely different from someone as a child who lost his or her mother or father and completely shut off from the world, right? And that it impact how we view about life. It impact how our brain is taking in all these informations and completely chronic stress that children has experienced over time. And so when I say the trajectory is completely different for this particular individual who doesn't have that any support system since he or she was a child, right? It's brutal, right? And anyway, so for me, that's where that whole idea of mental fitness comes in. You can just worry about just the next minute and then take that tiny action.
How do you use that mental fitness? And this may bleed into my next question about the framework that you created called Think. But how do you take that mental fitness and fill that gap that you're talking about, that gap of how you mentioned toxic positivity of I should be feeling great, I should be feeling capable, I should be feeling that I can do anything that I set my mind to, but my emotional state is not matching those thoughts. So you have that gap. So how do you fill that gap or close that gap so you can match what you're thinking with what you are actually feeling, and so you can put those 2 things in alignment?
Oh, you're such a great interviewer. So that gap, if you think about it, right, during that little tiny gap that we have, we're basically thinking about it, thinking that I'm not good enough. I'm not going to make it the rest of the people are making it. I'm such a victim, right? Bad things always happen to me. I'm just a fuck up, right? Those are the thing. Those are the thing that's going through your mind. Those are the thought that's going through your mind. And that's how rumination begins, right? Rumination is that repetitive thinking of things that are just upsetting to you. And so, hold on. I actually have a demo. Let me take the
This is great. As
out of the way.
every good scientist would, we
Okay.
a demo.
Okay. So this is just whatever. This could be your world, right? This cup. And I have some water here. And this could be all the environment that you're interacting with. It could be things at work. It could be your interaction with those difficult family members that you don't want to see during Thanksgiving, right? It could be anybody, your boss, so on, right? So this is all the interaction, all the conversations that's happening in the external world, right? So I have different, strengths of like napkins, right? When you're basically thinking that I'm not good enough, right? This is what you're doing. You are thinking, this is your mind. You are thinking about it, but then you're basically having that thoughts interacting with the events that happens in your life, right? And so this is us, right? Just literally observing. When we are just observing, we're just, okay, bad things happen to me, and you're just dipping it in. But then you don't just like stay drowned. You don't just keep on dipping it in, thinking over and over and over again, which is what we do most of the time. And that's where that rumination comes in, right? You just keep on dipping. I'm not good enough. Oh, why the heck like this person said this particular things to me? And you just keep on dripping and drowning. And so what happened is your mind is basically absorbed by all these events, all these thinking process that happens, right? And now it just become heavier. That's what your mind is feeling like when you're ruminating. That's what people going through PTSD and traumatic experience are going through. They're literally stuck. They can't come back out because they're just basically drowning in their own thought, right?
Yeah.
What we want to do is basically, instead of just like keep on thinking and thinking and thinking without actually halting, without actually stopping the pattern, like, okay, hold on, wait a second. I have a brand new napkin now. Wait a second. I'm thinking I'm not good enough. Okay. Now you're observing. You're becoming aware of your thought. Now you're writing it down on a piece of paper. Do you know that there was a recent study that happened where they actually like quantify the number of thoughts that we all go through, and at least on average, we all go through at least 60,000 thoughts daily. It doesn't have to be just negative thought. It could be like, oh, I kind of like him. Oh, I'm gonna be on Ian's shows. Oh, right. I mean, oh, I'm hungry. Like those are all the different thoughts, right? But like what we repetitively keep on thinking about it are the ones that get us into trouble. And so where that think framework comes in, based on neuroscience backed framework, is basically you have to first track your thought. Every time you're thinking about a particular bad things, right? You gotta like start writing it down, because you cannot change what you don't see. And it's also part of your rinse method, right? Recognize and aware of what's happening. Right. And so when you start seeing that, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm such a fuck up, you just keep on writing, then you start to like, wait a second, you pattern interrupt. Like, why am I thinking this way? Is it true? What is causing that? You got to get into that root system. So T in think framework comes in track your thought, because it narrow your focus on a list of thoughts that you've been having. Right. And you see, we got to become a scientist of our own life. right? What do scientists do? They observe, they write things down systematically so that they can track a pattern, right? And you got to know about yourself because you'll always feel powerless if you're just letting your mind wanders aimlessly, right? So what Think Framework does is I want us, all of us, to become the thinker of our thought because we are not our thoughts, right? And then so that's where also like the mental fitness comes in, right? So you're just observing, so you're not like drenched like with this napkins, right? You can still like dry it up, and then when bad things happen again, right? Ultimately, what you want to do is like, okay, it's okay, right? Are you not going to think about it? Of course you're going to think about it. Yeah, we're all human. We have a brain. That's why we think about it. But then now the bounce back is much faster. Your ultimate goal is instead of becoming this frail napkin that's being drenched, you want to become more of a bounty, right? So it's more resistance. Oh, well, there goes for the bounty advertisement. But anyway, so that's where the Think framework comes in because when I was going through major depression and PTSD myself, there just this toxic, harming thoughts that just keeps on coming into my mind that there are days that I just couldn't get out of the house. I was literally crippled. There are days where I won't ruin it for the reader, but this 7 words basically ruin my whole entire life. At least that's what I thought, 10 years ago is that, oh, hello, Miss Wayne. We have more important cases we need to handle. And that was the day when I started feeling like, oh, what's so important about all these other cases that this detective is handling? Am I not good enough? Like when you face that injustice, that's when you have that personal attack. Anyway, so I just keep on waking up each day. It's just like, what is the point, right? The world isn't fair. People are always out there to get me. And that it changes the reality that you're in because you are just thinking about this over and over again, right? You're drenched, your mind is heavy. So when someone is trying to give you a personal, like critical feedback, you don't take that as growth of opportunities. You take that as an attack because the world isn't fair. The world is out there to get me. And so, I wish I have this way of thinking, even though I was a neuroscientist. You see, sometimes what we know goes out the window when you're actually basically are drenched in your own diarrhea full of shit, right? Literally full of shit. And so you got to get back to the basic. And that's why, just taking the next breath, just take that tiny action. You don't have to be tough all the time. You can just focus on the next moment. That is enough.
It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF. Yeah. Going through some of the traumatic events that you have experienced in your own life and having that background of being a neuroscientist and an advocate for mental health, how's this influenced your understanding of the connection between brain function and resilience? because clearly you have bounced forward from some traumatic events in your life and you understand what that takes. But I was hoping you could kind of dive into how does our brain and our nervous system actually weave into the resilience of a person to be able to bounce forward from setbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. There was this really great podcast that Andrew Huberman did on YouTube. You should look it up. The Neuroscience of Fear, and that he sort of go into the layer and the foundations of fear plus stress, right? It then builds up, which then become your perception of traumatic experiences. Anyway, the basic foundation is stress, right? Especially as a flow coach, we know that, stress is good for you, right? But again, there's that bell-shaped curve, like there's the optimal amount of stress that you need. But then beyond that, when you are having that repetitive exposure to stressful situations, like always worrying about money, financial situations, always worry about someone's always watching over your shoulder, behind your back, at work, always worrying about someone's out there to get you. Those are the chronic repetitive exposure of stress, right? Stress is a physiological response that happens in our brain and in our body. So just simply think about a time when you are upset. And it doesn't have to be really big. It could be as small as you getting on the phone call with the customer representative or that doctor office that they said they're gonna call you right back, and they never did. And then you call back and it's like, what the heck? Just do your job.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what you're thinking in your mind.
Right.
And so that's when that happened. Next time when that's about to happen, I want you to notice those physiological changes, like anything. Like sometimes you
my heart rate or my breath or my temperature going up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And one of the things that you may also notice is shallow breathing, right? When you are not breathing from the belly, right, or diaphragm, you're actually not giving that enough oxygen to your brain. And so it's creating that scenario, sending the signal that, hey, you're in danger. A tiger or lion's gonna eat you. I mean, that's what we are trained to do biologically, evolutionarily, right? Hunter and gatherer and so on. And so what happened is there's a center, right, in our brain. This is, I don't know if you can see it. Don't worry about the skull. This is your brain, right? So you think about it, this is our brain here, right? And this is the frontal lobe of what we call prefrontal cortex. So this front of your brain is basically, you can think of that as the CEO of your brain, the rational, logical reasoning of your brain. But that part isn't fully developed, especially in teenagers, right? But evolutionarily, when you look at the cross sections, there's this little tiny thing, you can look it up, amygdala. It's an almond shape here, right? That's our fear center. And so when you are going through stress, the amygdala is basically a smoke alarm, right? Like, hey, there's a fire. But what happened under repetitive chronic stress or exposure, such as traumatic experiences, and then your whole perception of reality changes, right? Is that smoke alarm would have turned off. Right? This amygdala, this part of your brain, the fear center, is basically alerting your part of the front, your other parts of the brain, like, you're in danger, get ready. And it's basically creating that false positive. It's basically saying intruder to everybody that just passes by, right? And so your brain is preparing for that. What that happened, basically, whenever you're stressed, right, a whole flood of cortisol, right, just flushes into your bloodstream. And over time, when you're completely stressed chronically over time, what happened is this front part of your brain shrinks. the rational part of your brain shrinks because of overloading of so much cortisols, but it also hype up this ulnar part of your area, amygdala. So now you can understand why, people who go through traumatic experiences, for normal individuals who are just observing or interacting with individuals with traumatic experience, we're like, oh, you're snap out of it, right? Like, just move on with your life. It's over. But then what they don't know is that they literally cannot biologically, right? And so that's where all these training about resilience and mental fitness and becoming aware and cognitive feedback, neurofeedback loop comes in. Because what it's doing, it's basically halting or reducing the activity in your fear center, right? And then strengthening the connections back to the front part of your brain. When you are not stressed, basically your brain is like creating all these different logical sources that you need to do in the front part of your brain, right? Like the CEO who is basically directing, okay, you go do that. Oh, I gotta worry about how I'm gonna pay my bill for this business, for that business, right? It's basically coordinating, orchestrating all these different things. But when you're under a lot of stress, that's where burnout comes in. That's where chronic stress happens. What happens is your brain literally shrinks. And so when we gotta get back on rebuilding those neuronal pathway. And one of the things that you will see in high achiever and people just who bounce back, in people with so much great resilience, is that they just bounce back as they literally shift their mental mind, right? They're completely in a different space. Oh, I went through shit, but okay, I'm still in the shit, but I'm gonna basically transport myself to a different way of thinking. And what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Okay, I can do this. And then they just literally teleport themselves to a different alternate reality to then convince themselves that they can do it. Just you thinking about it, it's basically laying that foundation. It's basically creating the pathway. Of course, it's not going to happen right away, right? It's like constructions. What happened? You got to start mixing the cement, laying the foundation. So that's sort of like a little biological pathways that's happening.
So speaking of pathways, I was looking, I saw a post that you had on LinkedIn a while back about like neural pathways actually being created in your brain, which I found fascinating because you hear people talk about creating new neural pathways so you can, pull the things that you want towards you, whether it be your success or, whether it be things that you want to achieve, but actually seeing it, having a visual of it actually happening kind of blew my mind. Like that was amazing. But I was hoping, can you talk about, speaking of, creating neural pathways, we've talked a lot about trauma and we've talked a lot about, being stuck in those situations and having that repetitive self-doubt or negative self-talk, or even that toxic positivity. Can you talk about how does somebody build resilience or bounce forward from their challenges by creating those new neural pathways? And how does somebody go about doing that so they can essentially, as you said, create that new reality for themselves that they want to live in?
Yeah. It goes back to taking tiny actions. And I know it's, I don't say this lightly as someone who felt like, how do you look up when your wall is just like crumbling, right? How do you like walk up high? And so when I say this, I don't say this lightly, but you got to just not worry about next year, next month, next week. Just worry about right now. And there's this book I really like. It really changed how I view about things. Is that book is called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg at the Stanford University. And we all know motivation is like that flaky friend, right? Who show up for a party, right? But then it's never stick around for cleaning and helping you clean.
Yes, motivation
And
wanes over time. Yeah.
yeah, but real change is hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why when it comes to thinking about change, right? Because you're in one state and you're trying to teleport, create that new reality, you're basically having the need to change, reinvent themselves, right? And how do we do that? It's damn hard, right? We all know. That's why most of the time our New Year resolutions are dead before the February come. But in order for the real change to be sustainable, you gotta make that resistance to be so incremental. The resistance to overcome whatever you need to do has to be so small, so tiny, right? That you don't even think about the resistance. So for example, let's say I want to eat healthy, right? Now we all know like some of the stuff that we do, right? If you want to go to the gym, you don't have to worry about going to the gym. You just have to take out your shoe, right? And you don't have to go inside the gym. Or the next day comes, what do? You just put on your shoelace, right? Like just you trying to put the sneaker out. You're basically signaling your brain, like to the rational part of your brain, like, okay, I guess I need to work out, right? My cholesterol say otherwise, I need to work out. But then what happened? The gym is so far away. I have to drive. Gas prices are high, right? You come up with all the different reasons not to do it. Then it's okay. See, that's where that like society expectations comes in. Oh, now you're just giving up too easy. I mean, no, you already started it, right? The next day comes, all you gotta do is just put on the damn shoelace. You don't have to go inside the gym, right? Just take that tiny action consistently. And it's okay. All you do for the entire month is just put on the shoelace, right? Again, nobody talks about the effort it takes. Remember, we're all different beings. We all have different genetic makeups. So how you respond to situations in life is different from how somebody is going to respond. And it all comes together from how we're brought up, how we perceive about the world. And so you can't just put the same standard on how you react versus how other people react. What you need is more compassion, more empathy, more understanding of why we are reacting or acting the way we are acting or not acting at all, right? So have that grace and then it's okay, right? Just high five yourself. And I know as part of the RINS method too, one of the things you do is celebrate small victories. And what it's basically doing is imagine, oh, I gotta work out. The gym is too far. You don't do anything. There is no action. But then you actively grabbing that sneaker, it's signaling your brain, oh, okay, I guess it's not that too hard, right? So start with whatever you can. Teddy Roosevelt said, do whatever you can with all you have, wherever you are. So if that's like 2%, just give that 2%. You know, there's this thing in the gym and the fitness world, like 100%, all or nothing. Fuck that shit. Like, I mean, yes, good for you. Go 100% all, but we're not built for that. I mean, at least I'm not built for that. So I need small, consistent, little tiny steps, and I'm okay with that. We all need to learn to be okay with where we are, just taking that tiny step and honoring that effort, because you, by doing that little tiny action, you're already signaling your brain like, okay, that wasn't too bad, right? And then it releases that like little hint of dopamine, giving you that additional reassurance that, okay, you're not too bad. And then it starts to slowly shift your teleportation process, right? I mean, you're not going to be absolutely out of your bubble of shit yet, but then you're finding a way to poke around to finally make that whole. But again, like, I don't want to say trust the process, but yes, trust the process and honor yourself, because again, and with this conversation was that most of the time, including myself, we all get into that comparison trap. But babe, you need to look at yourself of where you've been, how far you have come to be standing where you are. Don't worry about other people. Don't worry about where they are. Worry about you. Worry about your better future you, because they are depending on your present self or present you. So again, I don't say this lightly. Honor being a victim of all the bad shit happening to you. But then just take that tiny little step of doing whatever you need to do, right? Because one of the things that we need to remember always is our self-worth, our potentials are not defined by people, by our parents. So don't forget that. So again, closing this with, tying back to your questions about how do you bounce back with the resilience. Let's try to honor that process. Let's start where you are and know yourself about you can do this, right? And there's this book called The Tools by Phil Stutz, and they make a movie about it on Netflix. But one of the things he talked about, when you feel like you cannot do anything, when you feel like you can't go on, focus on your life force. And there's this pyramid that he draw. Underneath the foundational layer is your body, your physical health, and your mind, right? So even when you feel like you can't do anything, basically just go outside. Go outside. That's your pattern interruption. It doesn't matter if you feel like you can't do anything, just go outside. You going outside basically shifted that reality. And that's why there's a reason why, people just go and work out, because again, it makes them start to feel good. Like, oh, I don't think I could do it. But then they actually show up and do it. Oh, okay. That's not the end of the world. I survived. I'm okay. Right. So it brings back to that change of self-identity of okay, I'm not the fuck up. I just went to the gym and I work out. Okay, yes, the guy next to me was super buff and he was weighing 300 pounds, but it's okay. Hey, I'm a little better than I was 10 minutes ago, right? We need to start shifting that self-conversations that we're having with ourselves, that internal peace. You need to investigate why you're having those thoughts, why you're feeling those, and then find a way to nurture yourself, little step by step.
That's awesome. Khai, I love your conviction and your passion is because it bleeds through to your message. And for those of you who don't know, Khai's mission, it burns clear. So she helps professionals break free from toxic thought patterns and mental self-doubt while navigating society's crushing expectations, which we talked about today already. And then she bridges the gap between knowing what we should do and actually doing it when everything feels impossible. So with that, Khai, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to make sure that our viewers and our listeners know where to find out more about you, more about your think method, and more about your upcoming book.
Thank you. It's very exciting. You can follow me on LinkedIn. So it's Khai-Resilient Mindset. But I also want to give this offering to all your listeners out there, because this month May is for mental health awareness. And awareness for this particular 2025 year, the theme is going to be taking action, no matter how small. And so what I want to do is basically work with individual who wants to work with me for free, right? For the 2 session, let's find a way to systematize where you're feeling stuck and how we can start becoming a scientist of our own life. And so you can basically email me embrace.invisible.wins@gmail.com. Because again, I want you to be honoring the little wins that you are doing every day that are not visible to the world out there. And I just want to say, I see you. You need to see yourself. Because again, at the end of the day, if we don't take care of dealing with our toxic thought, it bleeds into how we show up at work, our interaction with other people, and most importantly, our interaction with people in our life and ourselves. And so, the mental fitness training of feeling empowered, becoming aware of your own thought patterns, and learning how to rewire your brain is so important. And it's not just woo. There's just tons of scientific evidence out there. And I want to say, I see you, I feel you. And again, I don't say this lightly, and I'm so proud of you. So please honor yourself. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, like just for those listeners out there, for listening to my stories.
Absolutely. Dr. Win, thank you so much for joining us today. And guys, as you know, we always end with stay positive, stay persistent, and know that mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.